Good morning on a gray day, my fellow Canadians. Well, I've been mulling this one over for a while. I haven't done a post in a bit. On fear and politics. Fear as a political tool. And what I see going on around me is a perfect example of what I've seen historically speaking. Fear being used as a tool of division. Fear being used as a tool of control. Fear being politicized to advance an agenda. I think the best examples I can think of, historically speaking, are Nazi Germany, the paranoia and the fear they spread through their people to ensure compliance and obedience. Stalin elevated that to a fine art. I don't think there was ever a society more fearful and paranoid than Stalin's Soviet Union. Historically, you can look it up, it was awful. What is worse to me is what I'm seeing happening here in my Canada. Exactly the same thing. Fear and division. Fear's a powerful motivator. I've seen people that I thought had common sense turn into absolute cowering, obedient little sheeple because of fear. Al Gore is a perfect example of fear and power. If you remember his presentation, An Inconvenient Truth, which was one of the primary motivators, people still quote that um, for their justification for their actions on climate change. He made a fortune. Al Gore was a politician, but he saw an opportunity to play off people's fears, and he made a bundle. He made a fortune out of that, his presentations. Now, of course, everything he said was debunked by climatologists. Climatologists debunked his entire presentation. Didn't make any difference. He made his money. Where is he now? Anybody hear of Al Gore? Nope. He made his bundle, and it's a resounding fuck you to the rest of the world. I'm rich. You're stupid. Thank you. There are people, fear and power. If 2 years ago I'd have said, who's Dina Henshaw? Who's Theresa Tam? Who's Eileen de Villa? Who's Dr. Fauci? Most of you, I wouldn't have had any idea. Dina Henshaw, now she's written a book. You want to talk about fear paying off for her? Fear mongering? You have these people who basically lived and worked in the shadows. I'm not saying they didn't do good work, but think of this now. With fear, they have all this power. They determine the course of your lives. They determine the course of your children's lives. Who you can and can't see, where you can and can't go. Vaccine passports? Seriously? Seriously? In my Canada? Show me your papers? And people are drawing, a lot of people like myself are drawing the parallels to Nazi Germany, to the internal passports within the Soviet Union, the control, and people are just going along with it. What happened to my Canada? To the Canadians I grew up with, who had grit, who had guts. And now I'm watching people that I thought, like I says, I thought were staunch Canadians caught in the fear. There's evidence out there. I'm not going to go on the whole coronavirus. There's the pros, the contras seem clearly divided into two camps. Everything put forward by the proponents of the lockdowns and the restrictions and the draconian measures undertaken by the government, every one of those things has a rebuttal by equally eminent physicians and scientists and doctors. So it comes down to, who do you choose to believe? Speaking of rebuttals, I had a very interesting conversation with a marvelous friend of mine. One of the things that I want people to think about is, when you get information, there are two things, and I've gone on and on and on about this before. Cui bono. Who benefits? Where is the good, right? So if someone is pushing an agenda, do you have skin in this game? Are you being paid by someone to push this? Is this to your benefit? The detractors for the virus, and one I'd like to bring up in particular, the detractors, the ones who are speaking against the measures being enacted in our society. Michael Yeadon, who was one of the chief researchers or scientists at Pfizer, he's put out actually several videos. Now, this is a man who does not want to be in the limelight. He doesn't want fame. He's a shy man. He says, I am a shy person. I'm a bit of an introvert. I don't want to be a public figure. He came right out and said that. He said, I'm rich. I've made a lot of money. I'm quite wealthy. I'm well off. I don't want to do this, but I have to do this for the sake of society, for the sake of humanity. I have to speak up. And he is well worth watching, because he has no skin in this game. He's got no dog in this race at all. But he spoke up. What was Pfizer's rebuttal? Oh, he's a disgruntled ex-employee who's just trying to slag the company. That's not a rebuttal. That's a denial. Big difference. Big difference. If I say this, and that, someone equally eminent comes from the other side of the aisle and says, no, this, and that, from their viewpoint. Take my points, rebut them. Take my point, rebut it. Take my point, rebut it. Give me an actual rebuttal. Perfect example of the lack of this, of denial versus rebuttal, was the CCFR put out a pamphlet prior to the last election. A little late, unfortunately, laying out on government documents, all researched and all verifiable, Trudeau's lies, Trudeau's deceptions. What was Trudeau's response? He didn't rebut this, nor did anybody in his cabinet. He just said, no, they're all lies. Now, this is all verifiable and factual, but all he said was, they're all lies. That's not a rebuttal. That's a denial. So when someone comes to you with evidence that you don't like, or a viewpoint you don't like, don't just deny it. If you have a rebuttal, fine. And if you don't have a sound rebuttal, at least consider what you've been told. This was the Canada I grew up. These were the Canadians I grew up with. Common sense, practicality, pragmatism. Now people are just blindly swallowing the narrative and polarizing us, dividing us into, God, the rhetoric, the condemnation, the castigation, the defamation, the names being hurled about, the invective, because someone has the nerve to fly in the teeth of the narrative. Based on what? Fear. Some of us, myself as a prime example, I refuse to live in fear. I refuse to live in fear. There is so much evidence out there. I'm not going to go into it. So much evidence out there that we are being played. And politicians, well, Doug Ford is a perfect example, conservative. I thought he would be a much better leader for this province than he is. I have to vote conservative. NDP and Liberals have both shown what they are, and they're a disaster. But I would like to see a solid conservative come up to replace Doug Ford, because I think he's dropped the ball on this big time. I worked in his campaign. I admired the man. I expected better. Just like O'Toole, I expected better. We've seen people who are making a bundle. Dina Henshaw has written a book. If you don't know who she is, look it up. She's written a book. And the fear has paid off big time for her. Not only has she got all the perks of her position and the money involved in her position, But that fear has paid off for her another financial windfall. Eileen Davila. You've got people who are nobodies now control your life, determine where you can and can't go. Even talking about the holidays, oh, don't get together. That's bad enough. Now they're going after the children. Pfizer is pushing for a vaccine for children. With all the negative things that have come out, and the fact this is not duly researched, they're going to go after your kids. I've seen some heartbreaking. If you see a few, it's like a cockroach. You see one cockroach, you know there's probably 100 that you don't see. You'll hear one story about a negative side effect. I saw this heartbroken mother whose 16-year-old daughter's life was destroyed because at her encouragement, she'd had the shot, no negative effects. She took her daughter and had her get the shot. Now her daughter is medically devastated. One dose of the vaccine. Now that's just one of hundreds of thousands of stories. Countries all over the world, states in the US, are rethinking their position. What does that tell you? But so many people in fear will not research. Just, nope, nope, nope. I've been castigated because I'm unvaxxed. Really? You've had the vaccine. They tell you it protects you. Well, no, my friend told me, it doesn't really protect you. It'll just lessen the symptoms. That's not a vaccine. I had vaccines when I was a kid. Lots of them. 7, I think. You didn't get the disease once you had the vaccine. That's what the vaccine does. It stops you from getting the illness. So if you're not, you can still get sick with the vaccines, or you need the boosters. How many boosters? There's talk floating around now every quarter. You're going to have to get 3 shots a year. Or 4 shots a year, pardon me, quarters, of course. Really? And meanwhile, Pfizer, they've made up all the money they lost in lawsuits. AstraZeneca, Moderna, you can look it up. It's public record how much they paid out in lawsuits. They've made all that money back. So do you think they're objective in pushing this? Pfizer now, the whistleblower, thanks to James O'Keefe and Project Veritas, blew the whistle. For those of you who are deeply religious, Pfizer uses aborted fetal tissue in its vaccine. He got them on tape. He got the executive on tape admitting this. A whistleblower came forward and said, you know, like the Jehovah's Witnesses, for instance, how many people have religious reasons, if they knew this, would be screaming. Mainstream media suppresses a lot of information that I think we should have. Informed consent, isn't that a key to a free society? Informed consent. You know all the ins and outs, the do's and the don'ts. You have all the information that you can sort through, and you can say, okay, I choose to believe this or I choose to believe that. But you have all the information you need. Big tech is deliberately suppressing information. They're fact checkers. All I'm saying is this: wake up. You are being controlled by fear. You are being dominated by fear. This fear-mongering is turning you into monsters. This fear-mongering is turning good people into jackbooted Nazi thugs, and that's not an exaggeration. I've said it before, the term I've always loved, the tyranny of the self-righteous. But these people have forgotten what it is to be a Canadian, have forgotten Canadian values, and not just here, I'm seeing this in the US as well. This is not the Canada I grew up in. This is not the Canada I love. And these are not the Canadians that I admire and respect. I don't know what these people are. So wake up, people. There's so much information out there. You have a brain, use it. You can research, do it. And don't just read one side of a narrative. Forget the mainstream media. They're pushing the government agenda. I mean, they're already proven liars. But there are so many good platforms out there, and there's so much good information out there that you should be able to look for and make your own informed decision. Now they're, oh, we're in a health crisis, we're in a health crisis, we're in a health crisis. But we're firing doctors and nurses because they won't adhere to our agenda. Explain that to me. how you will cut back drastically on staff when you say we're in the middle of a health crisis. I can't see any logic to this whatsoever. Who's going to replace them? Who's going to do the work? And when medical professionals, frontline staff, who last year were heroes and now they're zeros, when they're being let go, if a medical professional is telling me I should be leery or at least cautious about following the narrative and taking these shots, when I hear that from a medical professional, shouldn't I listen? If you hear that from medical professionals, shouldn't you listen? Or are you just going to put a name tag? And this is the big thing too. I've bitched about this time and time again. You're an anti-vaxxer. Not anti-vax, your choice. You want the vaccine, take the vaccine. You think it'll benefit you, go ahead. But at least do your research. And if you're wrong, and if it costs you negatively, the choice was yours. And at the end of the day, we are all responsible for the choices we make. But to be told that I pose a threat to my fellow citizens because I'm unvaccinated? Are you serious? If I was sick in any way, I would not be out in public. I'm not. I won't go into my medical background, but I will tell you this. I'm immune. I have a good immune system. More and more information coming out about that too, natural immunity versus the vaccines, or at least the shot, call it what it is. I don't think you can call it a vaccine. Stop being afraid. Open your eyes and look around. Don't just swallow the narrative. Don't just obey. Don't just comply. Look, research. You have a brain. Use it, please. And let's put this behind us and move on. Have a good day and a happy Thanksgiving to you all.